I always tell people the principles of influence that we talk about, these research-based approaches to make it easier for people to say yes to us, they are neither good nor bad.
Right.
They
Right.
simply are. They just describe how humans think and behave. So how we use that as a tool says something about us. And Aristotle put it well when he said character may almost be called the most effective means of persuasion. If we lose character, reputation, then we are probably not going to be effective no matter how deep our understanding is of the science.
Driven by purpose, fueled by passion, my words got power, my thoughts have action, motivation, stay gracious, that's greatness, be audacious, motivation, be audacious, innovation, be audacious, inspiration, be bold, motivation, be audacious.
Greetings and salutations. What's good, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Audacious Living Podcast, where our goal is simple. It's to help you live your best audacious life ever. It's always a pleasure to be here, and I truly appreciate you for spending time out of your day to be here with us. Now, today, this episode feels extra special because I had the chance to reconnect with someone who was one of my very, very first guests on my podcast I had back in 2008. Brian Ahearn was a guest on a podcast I specialized on leadership. We talked about leadership development, and it was so inspiring to see how he's continued to grow and evolve and deepen his commitment to ethical influence over the years. His journey has been remarkable, and this conversation really brings everything full circle in a really powerful way. Today, we're diving into the intersection of ethical influence, faith, and courage, three forces that shape how we show up, lead, and move through the world. And I want you for a moment to picture a compass. A compass does three things, okay? It tells the truth and points north every single time. It works naturally without forcing anything. And then thirdly, it guides you and others towards mutually beneficial outcomes. That compass is a perfect symbol for ethical influence, truthfulness, natural use of principles, and mutual benefit. And when faith becomes the hand holding that compass and courage becomes the feet moving forward, suddenly your influence becomes deeper, stronger, and rooted in something bigger than yourself. And that's really what today's conversation is all about. And like I said, having Brian join me as a guest today was just really phenomenal. He's a Cialdi method certified trainer, one of just a dozen people worldwide that were personally trained by Dr. Robert Cialdini, who's he's the founder of Influence, and he's a global speaker, a consultant, and an author of several books. Brian, he's recently authored a book called The Influence from Above, which blends psychology, faith, and purpose in a unique and very powerful way. Brian's mission is he's here to help people ethically apply the science of influence so that we can experience more success professionally and more happiness personally. And I think this is so relevant to this episode because Brady embodies the heart of ethical influence. His work reinforces that message that we champion here on this podcast, and that's integrity, courage, and love are foundational to making a meaningful and lasting impact. And his ability to connect research-based principles with biblical truths, offer guidance for leaders, believers, and anyone looking to strive to live with purpose. And so now that we've got you all set, and let's not wait, and we're not going to have you wait any longer. Let's throw to our chat with Brian. So grab your compass, truth, alignment, and mutual benefit, and join me on this powerful conversation. Let's dive in. Hey, Brian, thank you for joining me here today on the Audacious Living Podcast. It's great to catch up with you after all these years.
It's been a long time. I didn't realize it was as long as you said. I thought it was maybe 6 years. You're saying it was like 10, 11 years, something like that.
I'm telling you, I think it's like close to like 15 years, Brian, since we chatted last. Literally.
Yeah, well, I thank you. You were the second podcast I was ever on, and that helped me get rolling. I've been on a couple hundred shows since then. So, but I got my feet wet with you.
Oh man, well, I'm honored. I'm blessed. I mean, back then, it was a leadership podcast that I was doing, and I still love leadership, and I loved it back then. That's why we did that, and we had we had a very spirited, enjoyable conversation about influence, and that was in pretty much the early days of your work, and we're here full circle. We're back talking about influence again, but in a slightly different vein because you've written a book that draws an intersection between faith and influence, and you draw some really neat parallels. And so, but maybe for our audience who doesn't kind of fully know who you are and the work that you do, or don't remember from 15 years ago, and things do change, right? And so, if you don't mind, introduce yourself to our audience, tell them about the work that you do, and then we'll get into the book for sure.
Sure. So I'm Brian Ahearn, and I am a Cialdini Method certified trainer. I own my own company called Influence People. The Cialdini Method certification is pretty rare. There's only a dozen of us in the world right now who are personally trained and certified by Dr. Robert Cialdini to teach his methodology on ethical influence. And Dr. Cialdini is the most cited living social psychologist in the world on this particular topic. So it's a privilege to have been taught and mentored by him. The last time we talked, Audley, I was in my corporate role at a big insurance company here in Columbus, Ohio. In late 2018, I decided it was time to leave. I always knew I was going to do this influence training full time. So I left in 2018, and what I do now is I work with individuals and organizations. I teach them what we call the principles of influence and how to ethically use them to make it easier for people to say yes. Because I'm a firm believer that hearing that word yes, it leads to a lot of success professionally. It leads to a lot of happiness personally. During that time, I've written 5 books now and been blogging weekly for about 15 years. So just pumping out a lot of content. Everything is all around how to ethically influence people.
Yeah, no, the topic of influence has always been a fascinating one to me personally, and Dr. Cialdini's work, it was groundbreaking, and it still is to this day. It's impactful and as relevant as always, for sure. The element or piece that I very much am intrigued at is the ethical component that's been added to that. Or maybe it was always there. I'm not sure, but it stands out. Maybe it stands out more to me now than before. But I'd like to sort of talk about that. Why it was important for us to make clear and certain that that the ethics of influence are front and center.
Okay, well, if it weren't for the ethics of this, I would not be sitting here talking to you. I would not have gotten involved with influence the way that I did. And it all went back to a coworker giving a video of Dr. Cialdini presenting at Stanford. He was very clear about non-manipulative ways to move people to action. And so I was fascinated by what he talked about because I saw its relevance to sales. I liked the fact that it was based on research, it wasn't fluff, and his stance on ethics. So I started using the video around the company and would talk about influence. But in the meantime, I signed up for Stanford's marketing. They had a lot of tremendous materials. But one day, one of their marketing flyers hits my desk, and this probably was back in 2003, maybe.
Okay.
And it has Cialdini's picture. And it says in bold letters, bestseller, right underneath it, call it influence, persuasion, or even manipulation. And I just thought, can't believe they use that word because he's so clear about non-manipulative ways to do this. So I will just say the moral part of me felt like it needed to be addressed. I emailed Stanford, basically said, I don't know anybody who wants to be manipulated, and I don't know anybody who's looking to become a manipulator. That word cannot be helping your sales, but it's probably really hurting. Well, I never heard from Stanford, but sometime later, my phone rang at work, and it was a representative of Dr. Cialdini's from his company, Influence at Work. She introduced herself and said she was calling to personally thank me on his behalf because she said, you sent an email to Stanford, and because of that, they're changing the marketing of all of our materials. Wow. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. So we had this great conversation. Before we hang up, she says, if your company ever needs a guest speaker, Bob travels the world and talks about this. Now, Audley, here's some fate for you. I said, well, I sit next to the woman who plans our events and books our speakers. You want to talk to her? So summer of 2004, Bob's in Columbus, Ohio several times, and he addresses the insurance agents that represented the company. Meantime, I go through his 2-day training, ultimately go through his certification process in 2008, and the rest is history. But it all comes back to that word manipulation and my
Mhm.
feeling so strongly that it needed to be addressed. And so the ethics of how we do this are critical. Because if
Yes,
we are ever seen as unethical, I know, I'm sure your listeners know, angry or upset customers will talk to a lot more people than
they
happy.
will. That's right.
And um, and so the journey started with ethics. And the interesting thing is, I felt like I really had a handle on that. But as the years go by, it just gets deeper and deeper and deeper in terms of my understanding of what it means to really ethically influence people. Um, and now with the new book, Influenced from Above, I feel like it goes to an even deeper level. And I'm
Mhm.
happy to talk about any of those
Yeah.
components.
Yeah, well, it almost feels that with this new element added to it, there's a responsibility to ensure that ethics are front and center.
Mhm.
The idea of influencing it's you can take it either way, right? Like it's in the user's hands how they choose to use it, right? Like, yeah, I heard someone talking about they were talking about, like guns, right? Or and so it's whose hand is that gun will determine if it's good or bad, right? And I think influence is very similar in that regard, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I always tell people the principles of influence that we talk about, these research-based approaches to make it easier for people to say yes to us, they are neither good nor bad.
Right,
They
right.
simply are. They just describe how humans think and behave. So how we use that as a tool says something about us. And Aristotle put it well when he said character may almost be called the most effective means of persuasion. If we lose character, reputation, then we are probably not going to be effective no matter how deep our understanding is of the science. Um, but when we talk about the ethics, people always say, well, what does it mean to
Yep.
be ethical? So we have a framework for that, and there's three essentials. The first is truthfulness. I never, I always tell the truth and I never hide the truth, right? And there's some people who will say, well, I told you the truth, but they're also hiding something.
Right, right. They call it the white lie, right? It's a little white lie.
Yeah, if I am withholding anything that I know would be material to your decision
Yes.
making, then I'm not being ethical.
Right.
So that's our first component, truthfulness. Tell the truth, don't hide the truth. Second thing is we only utilize these principles in a natural way, meaning I don't fake liking you. I
Okay.
don't claim a false sense of scarcity, like there's, going away opportunity when the reality is I'll sell
Right.
it to you every day of the week,
Right.
right? So that really is the truthfulness, but it's very specific to the psychology. We only use the psychology that we naturally see present in the situation. And the third must have is we are looking to create mutually beneficial outcomes, or Stephen Covey would say win-win, right?
Win-win.
In sales, I know that if I'm a salesperson and you're a customer, you'd always like to pay as little as possible. I'd like to get my premium price if possible.
Yes.
But when we meet somewhere in the middle where you walk away and say, I feel like I got a good deal, and I walk
That's right.
away and say, you know what, I was still able to make a profit, we're both better off for that transaction. So those are the three critical elements to make sure that you are being ethical when you're influencing.
Good. I appreciate the dialogue. I wasn't expecting to go down the pathway of ethics, but I think it's important. When I'm glad that we did. I'm very much curious as to what's inspired the science of influence and biblical truth to come together for you and put it in a book.
Okay.
What was the inspiration there?
It was my daughter. So I had given a presentation in town many years ago, and she hadn't seen me live for quite some time. So I invited her to lunch the next day. We talked about the presentation and what she thought of it. But at some point in that conversation, she asked this question. She said, what I want to know is, where is God in all this?
Hmm.
All this psychology that you're teaching, Dad, where does he fit into the equation? I hadn't thought deeply about that, but we started to have a conversation off the cuff. And I found myself saying things like, Abigail, the principle of liking. I can't necessarily talk about love in certain corporate settings,
Right.
but if I employ the principle of liking the right way, where I get to know you, Audley, and I care for you and I want what's best for you. I said, we're getting pretty close to love at that point. Or I said reciprocity, that feeling of obligation you have to give back if I give first. Jesus encouraged us to be the first to give. Do unto others as you
Right.
would have them do unto you. He said it's better to give than receive. And so this is kind of how the conversation unfolded as we talked about this. And I just remember thinking this would be a great opportunity to write a book about how influence and faith come together. Because in all of my study, and this is 20 plus years of reading countless books on influence and persuasion, I have never seen any that have connected those two topics, influence and faith.
Hmm. And I think very much they complement one another, Brian. Like they very, very much do. And so when you think even within the context of living audaciously, I can see where it complements each other and helps to shape someone's ability to live audaciously, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I always, and I mentioned this before, I think, but I tell audiences, I will open a presentation, I'll have the word yes up on the screen, huge letters, yes. And I'll say, by a show of hands, how many of you would agree with this statement? That much of your professional success and personal happiness depends on getting people to say yes to you. Inevitably, every hand goes up because they recognize, certainly in the business world, you don't get hired if you don't hear a yes. If you're in sales, you don't make the sale until the prospect says yes to the proposal.
Right.
If you're a manager and you've got great ideas, they go nowhere until somebody above you says yes. So there's countless examples in business.
Right.
But then I tell them, I said, hey, how about when you go home? Is your life at home a little more peaceful and happy when those around you more willingly say yes? And absolutely, that's the case, right? When your spouse doesn't contend over something or your kids aren't pushing back about doing their homework or their chores, when they more willingly buy in and say, yeah, sure, I'll do that. Life tends to be more peaceful and happy. And I think that can contribute to living audaciously.
Yeah, no, I certainly see that. Tell me the story of Mr. John Andrews and why that was so impactful or relatable.
Well, I had written a book years ago called The Influencer Secrets to Success and Happiness. And the main character is John Andrews. And you meet the guy when he's born and you learn about his backstory and things, but you really follow him through his career as he learns about influence and persuasion from mentors, coworkers, bosses, etc. The book ends with him leaving his job as a CEO in his early 50s. So I
Okay.
always knew there's another book to be written. He's got a whole life ahead of him. And that's where I thought, oh, here's a perfect opportunity to continue his story in kind of a parable format to start fleshing out or teaching how these principles tie into biblical truth. So the new book opens with him 18 months into retirement, and he's starting to say, is this all there is? I mean, I've had a great career and I can afford nice vacations and all these things, but is this it? And on the encouragement of his wife, he gets involved with a building project, a community center at his church. And he starts to realize what made him a success in business may not necessarily lead to success with the congregation. And what will motivate the congregation may not necessarily work out in the secular world, as he's got to work with the city council and the
Right.
zoning boards, et cetera.
Hmm.
So he begins this study about how these two things that can help with success in two different environments can be blended together to be successful wherever you are. And it follows that journey.
So would you call the Book of John? Is that fair to say? Is that the
Uh, Book of John's a little better than mine, but it's funny. I had seen my old pastor at the airport many, many years ago,
Yeah.
and we sat down and we talked, and he said something about a book, and he'd written a few books, and I said, "Oh, I wrote a book, and I had a copy, so I gave it to him," and I said, "It's not sold as many copies as the Bible." And he looks at me, and he's kind of a different guy. And he looks at me and turns his head and he goes, "Well, I hope not. That's the word of God." I said, "I'm joking, Rich."
That's funny. Yeah. I couldn't resist. I had to. Sorry.
Yeah.
When we think about influence, I'd love to kind of get from your perspective and all your work and all you've done, what you've seen as some of the misconceptions that are out there around influence as a topic.
The biggest one is that people equate it to manipulation.
Mm,
And they're two different words because they mean two different things, right? Manipulating takes out of the equation any or all of the three elements that we talked about, right? I'm willing to lie to get what I want, or I'm willing to deceitfully use some of these principles just because I know it makes it easier for you to say yes, or I don't care what you get out of the transaction, I just care about me. That's what I would call somebody who's a manipulator. Influence isn't manipulation, but I always use the word now ethical
Okay.
because I'm surprised at how often people say, I'm really glad you talked about ethical influence. So it really helps stand out and create that difference. So that's a big misconception I think that people have, is conflating those two things. The
Mm,
other thing it's a misconception is people thinking they know how to do it, just because the reality is we are influencing people every day of our lives.
right.
Um, but I liken
So,
it
so they think they're
to,
good at it, right?
yeah, they
That's what
think
I
they
mean.
are,
Right.
but it's no different than like if I want to get in shape, or I'm sure any of your listeners, there's things that you could do immediately. You could
Right.
probably start walking, you could cut out desserts, you just know there's some basic things you can do. So it's not the knowing, it's the doing, it's the putting it into application. But if I really wanted to get healthy, I probably want to turn to a physical trainer. I
Right.
might want to consult with my doctor or maybe a dietitian. If I go to those experts and I learn and I put into practice, I will lead a much healthier life. And I think that's what it is when it comes to influence. Yeah, we're doing it, but are we doing it well? And do we
Yeah.
really know the science behind it? And then can we put it into practice in an ethical way?
Yeah, and that's I think a powerful question to ask. Like, am I doing it well? And I think there's lots of things. Again, to your point, there's lots of things that people will do and go, "Oh, great!" And it's almost like fool's gold, right? Like, "Oh yeah, I can do this because I've done." But it's talking about, like, it's one thing if I influence someone to do something, and the ethical piece isn't there, right? So let's go back to the ethical piece, right? The question, are you doing it well, right? And I would say, well, if you're manipulating people, if you're people walking away feeling not good or feeling bad about the transaction, then no, you're not doing it well. And so the
Mhm.
work that you're doing is very much encouraging, no, let's make it a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, one of the revelations I've had over the years is how important the principle of liking is. Now,
Mm,
people often ask, what's the most powerful principle? And I say it depends on the situation, and different principles can be helpful in different situations. But with the people that I work with, primarily salespeople and leaders,
yep,
um, people won't buy from you or follow you just because they like you, but they'll almost never buy from you or follow you if they don't like you.
right.
The thing that I've learned so deeply is it's not about me getting you to like me. And that's what most people do. I mean, you think about the car salesman who's going to say or do anything to get you to like him so you buy the car.
Hmm.
It's always about me getting to know and like you. And this is why it's so important. When you have that sense that, hey, this guy Brian really likes and cares for me, that's what opens you up to whatever I might be asking or proposing. Because you probably believe, like almost every other person I've talked to, deep down we believe friends do right by friends.
Right.
And when you see that I truly like and care for you, you believe that what I'm putting forth is probably in your best interest. But here's the good news. The more I focus on this in terms of getting to know and like you,
Hmm.
the more I do want your best. Because
Yes.
like you and everybody else listening, I want the best for my friends. I want to see them happy. I want to
Right.
see them successful. So if I'm getting to know and like you, then my interaction with you is designed to help you be more successful or more happy, depending on what it is that we are
Yeah.
talking about.
I've been working with and buying cars from the same car salesman for the last 15 years, maybe even longer now. And I legitimately like him, and he legitimately likes me.
Mhm.
And so to your point, it's you want the best, and he'll give me a call and guess what, we got this thing coming up, or don't wait, or wait now, or here's what we'll do, or there's a special, or do like he's always a constant, and
Yeah.
to the point where there's complete trust, there's complete belief and faith, but it
Mhm.
starts in the idea because I like him, and because I like him, and we like each other, let's do business together, and that's kind of what it's been.
Yeah, and you're going to find a way to, because you're going to get a quality car. He's not going to deceive you on anything.
Right.
You're okay with him making a commission, right?
Yeah.
Of course, he wants a commission, but he recognizes you're a long-term customer. He's not going to screw you, and he wants what's best for you because he wants you to come back again and have that same positive interaction. Unfortunately, a lot of people in those high-pressure sales
Yep.
don't take that approach.
Right.
And the reality is, a lot of those people, maybe you buy the car, you go back 3, 4, 5 years later, and that guy or that girl is gone.
Yeah.
They're off to a different dealership, or maybe they're in some other kind of sales, but they're never building a relationship. It's just about a power move to get you to buy that car. And I do think most people would like to say, you know what? I found a guy or a girl who is really trustworthy, and wherever they're selling cars, I'm going to probably go because I can trust them.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. Purpose and calling is something that you touch on in your book, and I'd love to hear how that correlates to living an influence life.
For me, that came about back in 1992, and I know it was 1992 because I was going through some old files just the other day, and I found the original mission statement that I wrote after having read Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Okay.
So I sat down and I wrote that and said at the very top, for me, the purpose in life, or Simon Sinek would say, my why,
Hmm.
is that when I die, God will say, "Well done, good and faithful servant." And then I thought about, well, how do I make that a reality? That can be pretty broad, it can be vague, but the good news is a lot of things can fit under that. And so the rest of the mission statement, I focus on faith, family, personal well-being, and then career in that order. And then within those, I have things that I focus on. Um, but I review that every single day, just about for the last 30 plus years. I would either,
Hmm.
when I was at work, I used to read a component of it. Now, every morning as I'm getting ready to go outside and do my walk, I listen to that mission statement. And for me, it gives a North Star. I can take what I do, and I tell people my why with influence people is your professional success and personal happiness. If I can help people attain more success at the office ethically,
Yes.
that opens up so many doors. I mean, it could be, to fund missions. It could be to take your family on vacation, get your kid through college. Any of those things that are your goals in life, it can help to do that. If I can help you have better relationships at home and enjoy that happiness, I think God will say, "Well done." Those were things that were really worthwhile. And in doing so, too, the opportunity that I have as an individual to have an impact on those people.
Hmm.
So for me, calling or purpose is incredibly important, and that's why I think it's a critical part of the book where he realizes, like, vacations, nice vacations only go so far. I've got to feel like I've got a sense of purpose in this life.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and that purpose that it's I love that what you talk about it being your North Star and being able to get so even when things are hectic or you face challenges or obstacles, right? That you can look up and go, oh no, this is where I still got to go, and that might even give you some direction as to whether how big you make this a challenge. So if this thing in front of you is blocking your North Star or blocking your direction, then as I was saying, if the thing in front of you is getting in the way of your North Star or blocking where you want to go, you want to deal with it. But if it's over here and it's got nothing to do with where you're going, then it's not. Then you ask yourself, is this really an issue that I want to give my time and attention to?
Yeah, it's like in the family section.
Hmm.
Again, I say faith is the most important thing, then family, then my personal well-being, and then my career.
Yeah.
Anybody who knew me from my career, I worked long hours and I put in everything I had because I loved what I did and I wanted people to succeed. And even now, even more so now in my role as owner of Influence People.
Hmm.
Um, but it allowed me to make choices. So, for example, in early December, our daughter turns 30. I've never missed a birthday, and it's a big one. So there's an event going on with the Cialdini Institute in Arizona on December 5 and 6, and her birthday is on December 6th. And I wrestled with it a little bit, but then I just told him, I said, hey, 30 is a big one. I've never missed a birthday. this has to take priority. And they understood. They're like, you know what? That is more important. I applaud you. Go and do that. But it helps me make those decisions. I still
Yes.
felt a little struggle
Yeah.
because,
Yeah. Yeah.
Cialdini himself, Dr. Cialdini has been hugely influential in my life. And anything I can do to support him, I want to do.
Yes.
But my daughter will always come first. My wife will always come first.
I love that. Great example. Speaking of example, can we talk about maybe some stories in the books or things that you point at that you use? I guess that would come from the Bible that you use in your book as well.
Sure. Can I address something before we do that too,
Sure.
though? When I talked about my journey and how this has gone deeper and deeper,
Yeah.
we've already talked about what it means to be ethical.
Yes.
And I stress that a lot. But as I thought about the book and some of the transformation that John goes through, the this takes it to a deeper level. My acronym for my company, Influence People, the word people stands for powerful, everyday opportunities to persuade that are lasting and ethical.
Okay.
And as I thought about this in a moment of inspiration, it was after the book came out, so it's not in the book, but I thought I can change that acronym to powerful everyday opportunities to persuade that are loving and eternal.
Mm, I love it.
If I am acting out of love,
Yes.
love for God and love for
Yes.
neighbor,
Yes.
ethics will take care of itself.
Yes.
And the thing that I really thought about was it's human nature that whatever the rules are, we like to bump right up against them, right? What's the speed limit? I'm going to go, I
Yeah.
won't say speed limit, right? Most will go 5 to 9 miles over.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, when you're young, well, what does the Bible say about, fooling around? How far can I go? We're always
Right.
wanting
Pushing
to
it.
go up to the line. But I
Mm,
think when you're operating out of love, you don't even worry about the line
no.
because the
No.
focus is, will this be pleasing to God? Will this be good for neighbor? And then I don't have to worry about those things. So for me, that took it to a deeper
Yep.
level. And then
Hmm.
also the understanding that if we do this well, instead of just saying lasting impact, it can have an eternal impact in that I do believe that when all is said and done,
Yep.
and this body is in the grave, what survives is my soul, your soul, and others.
Hmm.
And the only thing that God will care about is the impact that we had on other people to hopefully draw them closer to Him. And so if I can conduct myself in a way that's has integrity, that people resonate with, you never know what door that may open
Yeah.
to have an opportunity to speak into their life or what questions they may
Hmm.
ask. So that is this has gone even deeper than it was before.
Yeah. Yeah. When you're exhibiting kindness or love, let's go love, right, to others, it's an extension of God's love that you're giving to others.
Yeah.
And so his presence is existing within your actions when
Mhm.
we're operating from a place of love. And so I sort of appreciate that added on, if you will. And I think lasting eternal is a beautiful combination of words, and
Mhm.
it's very very powerful actually when you think about it. But it really forces people to think about, okay, so while I'm here for the time that I'm here, what is it that I can do to be lasting and eternal? And it's the way you make people feel at the end of the day. It's not the building with your name on the side of it or any monument that was erected in your honor. Those things can be knocked down in a heartbeat and your memory is gone. But the way you impacted people, the way they feel in terms of the way Dr. Cialdini has impacted you, right? That is
Yeah.
the sort of lasting impact we're talking about.
But but actually the L will be loving and
Love it to death.
and again if I'm genuinely loving you,
Hmm. Hmm.
um, then I'm going to want what's best for you.
Yes, yeah.
Even at times a sacrifice to myself. I will never lie to you, right? Jesus always told the truth. He was the truth. I will never deceitfully use principles to try to get you to say yes. So all of that gets taken care of. Now, an interesting thing is when I was reading, I love C.S. Lewis's work and especially Mere Christianity. He posed a question in there about how am I supposed to love people that I honestly don't like? And
It's a
we
million
all
dollar
face
question. It's a million dollar question, right?
but then he came to this revelation. He said, but then I realized there's somebody that I don't always like, but I do always love them. And he goes, it was me. He said, there's things about me that I don't like when they come to the surface. I'm like, ugh, I can't stand that. But I will always do what's best for
Right.
me.
Yeah.
And so that kind of, he said, freed him to realize I don't have to like the person
Right.
to be able to love them because I don't always like me and I love me.
Mm.
And that kind of goes to Cialdini's principle of unity. Unity is about shared identity.
Yes.
And and my dad being a great example, served in the Marines. My dad would do anything for another Marine, even ones he didn't like.
Hmm.
If we bring it closer to home, you and I, with family, there are things we'll do for family, maybe distant family members, maybe family members we don't like that we probably wouldn't do for some of our closest friends
Yeah.
because we have that shared identity. And that really starts to get to the heart of love, where it's said that there's neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female. We are all one in Christ Jesus. Then we start to see that we have that shared identity. Even if I
Yes.
don't like that person, I can still love them.
Love them. Yeah. No, no, no. And that shared identity is key. And sometimes it's almost like an obligation. Like you don't think, of course I'm going to love them. Of course
Mhm.
I'm going to do this for them. Man, I like them, but I'm going to do it anyways, kind of a thing. And so that's a really, really good example. But yeah. I was speaking of examples. I'd love to hear sort of what you've used in your book is to sort of speak to some of these principles.
Sure. There's a situation, and I don't want to share too much to give some things away, but
Hmm.
but there's a situation where the main character John is interacting with a lady named Victoria, and Victoria is nothing but a thorn in the side of this whole project. She is not a part of the church. She is part of the uh, city council, and she's on the school board, and she has very strong views about things, and some of them are motivated by prior hurt, but she is continually putting up roadblocks. And rather than respond in kind, right, where somebody pushes and you push back, John decides to take a more eternal and loving approach and tries his best to win her over, to help her recognize that this isn't personal. And his outreach about wanting to get to know her as an individual is genuine.
Hmm.
We've all faced those situations.
We
And so
have.
I hope it sparks a different mindset for people who maybe have that coworker or that client that they just, "Oh, God, I can't stand them," to maybe start taking a different approach, which starts with the mind, but then ultimately in terms of action with those people. So that's an example. And then one other interesting story within the story is um, even within a church congregation, you still
Hmm.
have human beings who have all of their insecurities, desires, all those things. And,
Yeah.
and when those things aren't fulfilled, they can be angry. And even though they're part of the congregation, they can still become stumbling blocks too. And John has to deal with this with an individual who thought that she should be tapped to lead this building project. And he is the one who's tapped. And so she's kind of
Right.
sowing seeds of discord. And so his, trying to win her over comes into play. So there's lots of subplots within the
Got you.
entirety of the
Mhm.
story.
Got you. Okay. Okay. Um, we talk again. This is the Audacious Living Podcast, and we encourage that spirit of audacity and courage. Try that again. Courage is a word that comes up always and often, and I think there's a direct correlation between courage and faith.
Mhm.
And there's lots and lots of examples of having the courage to have the faith, right? Like to
Mhm.
be able to believe or to take a certain direction or action.
Mhm.
How does that play out for you through your work? We talk about influence and I guess again living audaciously.
Well, you think about the word courage, and I'm not versed in Latin or anything, but I know that it goes back to heart, right? When I
Yes.
encourage you, I'm giving you heartfelt encouragement. Um, because it goes to the heart, and Jesus talks about we are heart, mind, body, and soul, right? And so at the heart level, where our will is, our deepest desires and beliefs, where those things emanate from, uh, it takes courage to sometimes go against the grain. Because, like, you might say, hey, based on my faith, this is what I believe to be right.
Right.
Therefore, I can't go out and sell the way the trainer is telling me to sell. I can't push the product that the company is saying to push because it's not actually in the best interest of the clients. That is where your courage comes from, your faith to say, I can't do that. And we all face those things.
Yes.
We may be going against the grain in a conversation in a social setting where we might have to say that's it's not what I believe, and my belief is based on this book here.
Right.
Um, so that's where I think faith and courage come together. I think it's Hebrews 11 that they call the Hall of Faith, where it
Okay.
talks about faith and all the people who, not having seen, still believed, even to the end, um, and that takes courage.
hmm there's a Martin Luther King Jr. quote I reference often about, having the faith to take that first step when you can't see the staircase. Like you've got no
Mhm.
idea where it's going, but you step anyways, right? And that faith and that involves courage. You have to have that,
Yeah.
and I would add to it a level of audacity to say I'm going to go, anyways, because and that gives you the permission to move forward.
Yeah. Well, I experienced that the day that I had the conversation with the CEO of my former company and I told him
hmm
I was leaving and
hmm
why, I knew that this is what I wanted to do with the rest of my career. I
Yep.
had been working toward this, but still, when I laid in bed that night and my wife and daughter were out of town, I'm staring up at the ceiling. The room is pitch dark. And my thought was, have I just effed my family? Because I
That's a
started
natural
thinking
thought. Yeah.
about healthcare and how
Yeah.
much
Yeah.
that's going to cost and what I have
Yeah.
to make pre-tax to pay for that after tax. And my mind was swirling. Um, for quite a while, I'd get up
Yes.
3 in the morning, like I just
Yes.
can't sleep. I've got to take care of this. Um, so it took a lot of courage to do that. But what I always came back to, I'd shake my head and I'd say, wait a minute, if you do this as well as you believe you can, you will do much better than you were doing in your corporate career.
Mm.
And I had to hold on to that truth. There were lots of things I had to figure out, but I held on to that truth. And it became the truth because
Yeah.
I've done so much better outside of the corporate world, been able to fund my 401k more, do other things because the business is going really well, met so many wonderful people. It
Mhm.
has been a complete blessing.
And what's beautiful about that is I'm more than certain that the blessings that you've experienced you would never have saw coming. You would never have guessed it. You would never have said, "Hey, if I do it," just they just part of that process of stepping into what you believe in. And so it's a beautiful story.
Yeah, I 100% agree that the things I firmly believe this. Like when I talk about my wife, I've often said, if God would have just allowed me to choose somebody, I get to build the perfect partner.
Yep.
I would not have gotten somebody as good as Jane, because truthfully, I wouldn't have believed that I could get somebody who's as beautiful, intelligent, funny, smart, puts up with my sense of humor, all of these things, athletic. I just would not have thought I would get that in a package. So
Right.
that shows the littleness of my faith. And I think that
Mm.
that applies to many other things too, um, that there are many things beyond what we see that await us because we have walked in faith and discipline.
Mm. At the end of it all, when readers, walk away after reading "Influence from Above," what is the hope they take away from your perspective?
I would hope the audience primarily would be people who are interested in Cialdini's work and want to see yet another way of applying it,
hmm
and also people of faith who are probably saying, "Yeah, I realize I have to influence people, but I feel smarmy sometimes when I have to sell." That they would be able to see that they can take what is so important to them, their faith, and they can use that as the underpinning while still relying on research-based approaches. I would hope that people would walk away and hopefully start having that revelation that this is much deeper than just following the rules and doing it ethically. That this can be a way of loving people. It can be a way of having an eternal impact. It's just a different tool than they might have thought of before.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we certainly will encourage listeners to grab a copy of your book. Where could we send them, Brian, if they wanted to connect, or even connect with you or get a copy of your book? Where could we send them?
Amazon, Barnes and Noble, online retailers like that are going to carry the book. What I will tell your listeners, if you buy the book and then you send an email to book_launch@influencepeople.biz. So my company's website, influencepeople.biz, but the email is booklaunch@influencepeople.biz. And you put the title of chapter 2, I will send you a free e-copy of The Influencer, the book that's actually the prequel to this book. So you will get the full breadth of John Anderson, having
His
met
journey.
him and his career.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. Nice. That's a great offer. Thank you for that. Now, so Influence from Above it's been released. It's out now, right? People can
It
get
is.
that now.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's
Okay.
out now,
Absolutely.
and I'm happy to report in the categories that it's in. The paperback's doing really well. It's like in the top 5 in business ethics,
Beautiful.
church leadership, and I forget what the third category is, but as a new release, it's doing very well.
Congratulations. That's beautiful and wonderful
Thank
to
you.
hear. Brian, this has been good. I mean, I really much appreciate it. I think we did better than we did 15 years ago. So, I mean,
Yeah.
thank you for that. It's certainly great to connect with you, but also great to reconnect with you, but also it's wonderful to see how the work has evolved for you and how your work has expanded even more since then. So it's a fabulous journey, and congratulations on that pathway you've taken. And thanks again for being a guest on the Audacious Living Podcast.
Oh, hey, it was my pleasure. Let's not let 15 years go by. I don't want to be in my mid-70s next time I talk to you.
Me neither. Me too. I'm with you as well. We're going to do something about that. Thanks, Brian. All the best, my friend.
Thank you.
Back, we are here on the podcast. Welcome back. It was great to connect with Brian again. If there's one message that really stood out today, it's that, influence is rooted in love always leads to ethical outcomes. When love guides your intentions, truth guides your words, and courage guides your actions, you create influence that doesn't just last, it transforms. It impacts people at a human level, and in some cases, an eternal love. And I think about what I love most. What really struck for me was in this conversation was Brian's honesty and vulnerability. Hearing him describe lying awake at night after he left his corporate job, wrestling with the uncertainty and responsibility and faith. It was really, really powerful. And I appreciate him sharing that. I think that moment captured courage in its purest forms. Courage isn't the absence of fear, is choosing to step forward anyway because your purpose demands it. I also loved how he reframed ethical influence as an expression of love. When influence flows from love, everything else, integrity, respect, truth, it just naturally aligns. That perspective stayed with me long after our conversation ended. So thank you again, Brian, for those insights. You can connect with Brian directly through the links. We got them in the show notes, so be sure to connect with him there. He's got a special offer. If you purchase his book, Influence from Above, and email him at the email address with the title of chapter 2 of his book, he'll send you a free copy of The Influencer. And you can go to Amazon, Barnes, Noble, all the major online retailers to grab your copy. Now, as we wrap up, remember the compass that we talked about, right? It was the truthfulness, natural alignment, and mutual benefit, held in the hand of faith, activated with courage. Let that compass guide how you lead, how you influence, and how you show up in the world for yourself and others. Because when you influence ethically and give people direction, clarity, and hope, and that is probably one of the most audacious gifts that you can offer to the world. I want to thank you for joining me on another edition of the Audacious Living Podcast. If you found today's conversation inspiring, or it shifted your perspective, or gave you something valuable to carry on in your week, please do me a favor and take a moment and like, follow, subscribe, or share this. Your support helps this community grow and empowers others to live their best audacious lives ever. Until next time, stay bold, stay brave, and keep living audaciously.
Driven by purpose, fueled by passion. My words got power, my thoughts have action. Motivation, stay gracious, that's greatness. Be